Done Millwall Podcast. So
Yeah,
nice to meet you.
my pleasure.
Uh, One of the questions I actually had lined up was being answered by the club this morning with the signing of Zach Sturge, which I thought was great news. Um, what areas are you looking at? Are where are you looking to improve the squad still? Are there other areas of focus for you at the moment? I mean, nice to see Zach, but is there anywhere else that you're looking to strengthen?
Yeah, I wouldn't be too specific in terms of positions. Obviously, there is areas we want to fill, but I think the difficulty you've got is it depends on who becomes available as well.
Right.
So I think any position that we can strengthen, we would actively do so. But as you'll probably tell, obviously we've lost quite a few players for certain areas of the pitch, and there are certain areas that we do need to replenish. We had Zach last season, who was excellent at the end of the season. I thought he really sort of came into his own. I thought with every game he played, he seemed to sort of gain confidence and performed well. And we
Yeah.
feel as if he's got a really high ceiling. He's quick, he's a big lad, he's really athletic, he's good in the ball. So we feel as if we can add sort of game understanding, bit experience, and all that sort of stuff to him. Then yeah, like I say, I think he's got a high ceiling. So we're delighted we got that one done. Obviously we've still got certain areas we do need to sort of try and fill.
Yeah, I mean, just following up on that, I mean, obviously, we saw a lot of familiar faces leaving the club earlier in the summertime. I mean, would you say that leadership is, if that's a right term, I don't know if it's the right word, but is that something that you're looking for other players within the squad to step up with the departure of, say, the likes of Jules Saville, just as one example? Is that, or Murray Wallace? Is that an area that you're looking for other players to come through on?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think not just the lads that you mentioned there, but you could also put Sean Hutchison, who was a
Yeah,
brilliant captain behind the scenes, although he didn't play that much. We had other guys in there. George Honeyman was a big voice in the change room as well in terms of motivation and getting the lads up for games and stuff. So I think there's a lot of onus on the current sort of senior lads that we've got. Obviously, like say Lenny, Coops, even Billy, who's been here a long time. Casper, who had a
yeah,
great season last year. And even some of the sort of younger ones, if you like. I mean, like you don't view Tristan as a younger one, but I think he's only 23.
yeah.
So I think a lot of the lads who play regular game time, obviously Jaffet is a sort of leader, but probably more of a leader in terms of how he performs and what he does. I still think he can probably add more of the sort of vocal aspect in terms of getting up people up the game and all that sort of stuff. But what you tend to find is a lot of players approach the game differently in terms of how they sort of position themselves within the changing room. What you'll find is you'll find some players that are really vocal and I've got a lot
Right.
to say, and you've got other guys that are sort of quite reserved and quite quiet, but I've got that sort of undertone of determination and then sort of more do it on the pitch. So they're more a doer rather than a sayer, if you like. So I think, like you say, we'd certainly need probably another voice or two would be helpful, I think, for the team.
That's fantastic, Alex. I'm going to hand you over now to Chris. We take it in turns on this. So, Chris.
Thanks, Nick. Hello, Alex. Good afternoon.
How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Thanks for taking us the time out, especially in a busy schedule.
Nice.
I had the pleasure of meeting you at the boxing a few years back. It was James de Gaulle. I think it was Eubank. I remember having a chat with you, and I remember thinking to myself, this guy would make a good Millwall manager. I think you were Preston manager at the time.
Right.
Um, so I'm just really keen to understand what kind of research you do into your clubs, or before you take the next step. You were out of work for a little while before you came into us. What sort of research do you do, and what was it about the Millwall opportunity that appealed to you at the time?
I think there's two main things that you always look at is the people you're going to be working with in terms of who the owner is, who obviously whether it be the chief exec or the director of football or I mean there's so many different names for that type of role, which obviously Steve's got for us at the moment. But I think definitely Jimmy and Steve were big factors because you want people who you feel you can work with, who you can create a good bond with. You're aligned in terms of what the strategy of the club looks like in terms of do you see yourself being a good fit for that and more importantly can you implement it as to what they want as well as looking at the squad. I think it's important as well that you go into a squad that you can look at and think that my sort of style that I would like to try and bring is going to suit the players at your disposal because if one or the other doesn't marry up then yeah that can be an issue. And we've seen probably examples over the years, some probably recently, some in the past, where somebody goes in and you look and you think, I don't think that's a good fit, and it ends up being the case that it doesn't really align. what I do feel is, I think my sort of working class background, my family's working class background, the way Millwall is, the grittiness that Millwall's got, what I was probably like as a player in terms of determination and tenaciousness and all these sort of characteristics, I think's embedded in Millwall. So, like you say, it felt like a good fit to me. What I will say, having came to the club now, but is the perception of Millwall to the reality of Millwall is a little bit different in the fact that although we've got this sort of hard exterior, which we have, and we never sort of give up and we never sort of slay down, if you like, there is also a real sort of family closeness element within the club. And it's a great mixture. And for me, it's allowed me to settle in really, really well.
Yeah, and you certainly have done. So that's great to hear, Alex. Thank you. My next question is related to, I guess, more on the pitch. Now, one of the problems we've had in recent years is our ability to score goals, right? And I think it's fair to say that is an obvious one that we need to try and address moving forwards. How do you plan to tackle that in the new season? And how much of that comes into your thinking in terms of formations? So, obviously we had Mihailo and Josh playing up top. You're not normally, I think it's fair to say, a two up top kind of guy, but you're always happy to flex. So just trying to understand how you're thinking about approaching that this season.
Well, it's two things, isn't it? So we didn't score a lot of goals as years have went by, as in general, Millwall. But what we have been is defensively really solid for a number of years. So what you find is, if you're defensively solid, you're going to struggle to score goals because you've got more men behind the ball, and that's sort of how you're set up. What I have tried to do is be much more aggressive and try in terms of getting the ball back and pressure and getting after it. I think from January onwards, we went for about 16th in the league in terms of pressing the ball, to in the second half of the season, we were number one in terms of pressure on how many passes opposition have, basically. So that was something we moved on significantly. I think at the end of the season, I think for probably about the last 8, 9 games, we scored in every single game. Whereas if memory serves me right, I think in the first 9 games prior to me coming in, I think we'd scored maybe in 3 out of the 9 or whatever. So that was certainly an issue. As far as formations go and players are concerned, I more work it off the basis of you want to get your best players in the team. My job's then to come up with a sort of structure and a formation, if you like, or tactics that are going to incorporate who we would deem to be our most threatening and better players. And at that point, I felt Josh and Mihailo needed to be in the starting lineup. To give you a little bit of context, when I was at Sunderland, again, like you said, I'd never really played a sort of two up top, but I had Ellis Sims and I had Ross Stewart. So when I was there, we played a 3-5-2, which I'm not really a big fan of a back three, but I couldn't sort of fit them out my team. And I also had wingers who were a real threat, Jack Clark and Patrick Roberts. So again, I work back from let's try and find a way to get the best players in the team, providing obviously it gives the team balance and it gives the team the best chance of winning the game. And then for there, my job is how do I construct that and how do I put it together? And that's where we sort of landed, if you like, for the last maybe 8, 9 games of last season.
Thanks, Alex. I think a part of it as well is just keeping some of the attacking talent we've got fit, right? And hopefully we can certainly do that. So thank you. I'll hand over to Dan from Lions TV. Thanks, Alex.
Good afternoon, Gaffer. How are you?
Yeah, very good.
Good. I just want to say I appreciate your time as well, on top of what everyone else said. My first question is, I've seen you've been very vocal in the press and on Millwall, the website, etc., on Twitter, that you feel the togetherness at Millwall between the fans and the players is really big and bigger up than it has been at other clubs. Have you had any personal experiences what this led you to believe that?
Sorry, I don't really understand the question.
So when you first came to the club, you said many times that you feel that the togetherness between the fans and the players, is special at this club. What's brought you to that conclusion?
I think mainly, obviously, Millwall fans are unique in the fact that when the team's doing well, they will back you 1,000,000%. But equally, if they don't like what they see, they'll quickly let you know. And I think that when you've got a fan base that's as passionate as that and like that, then what happens is it does have an effect on the team. So when the lads are doing great and the fans are behind them, that connection, I think, gets us another extra 10, 15% out of the players. But equally, when things aren't going well, it can sometimes be difficult, and listen, there's some fans up and down the country that are like that. I think Millwall are certainly like that. And I think what it does do is when the players are playing well and the fans are behind them, I think that the players go out there with a real confidence in what they're doing. And I think that's why a lot of people over the years have found it really, really difficult to come to the Den and try and pick up points, and certainly I think we won our last 5, maybe 6 games of the season at home, which wasn't really the case when I first came in. When I first came in, my home games initially was probably where we struggled more. We were better on the road. And then by the end of the season, we'd sort of resolved the home form. And I felt that a big part of that was the atmosphere felt so much better towards the end of the season. The fans were really behind us. You could see that they came to the games with a sort of expectation that we were going to perform and we're going to try and win, but more importantly, knew the part that they had to play in terms of getting behind the team. So that's probably where that comes from in terms of those comments. And every Millwall fan that I have met has been overwhelmingly supportive in terms of obviously wanting us to do well, wishing us well, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think that certainly helps.
You just said there about, when you first come in, potentially it wasn't going as good. It took you time to find your feet. And then once you did, the finish was absolutely brilliant towards the end of the season. Potentially maybe not even on the pitch, but off the pitch. Was there anything that you've had to, what's the biggest wholesale change you've had to make, maybe in and around a training ground or whatever, if anything?
Yeah, I think in terms of how we play is probably the biggest change for me in terms of the bit that I found, and I think the players found maybe challenging is if you think in Millwall for the last probably 6, maybe 7 years, even maybe longer than that, we've sort of played as a sort of compact, deep-lying team that then tries to hit in the counter predominantly. I think at home we have added an element of aggression at times. I watched the Blackburn game before I came in. We're certainly more aggressive in that match, but I don't think that that's something that was consistent in terms of how we performed. So certainly trying to get the players to press the ball and be aggressive in that first instance when the first pass was made was something that took us probably 4 or 5 games to really get a hold of. And then there's one game that sticks out in my mind so much was at home against Norwich. And what Norwich do is make it difficult. So they sort of fold into a back three and it's hard to get pressure on the ball. And I remember Casper running over after 10 minutes saying, they're playing conventional, they've not folded it. Can we run after them? I'm like, yep, on you go. And the next minute, away they went. So, and that game stands out in my mind in terms of getting the balance right, like I was saying earlier, about trying to score goals, being aggressive. We were ollie-ing Norwich at home after 65 minutes. Do you know what I mean? Which, if you said that to me when I first joined it, we would have got to that stage within a short period of time. Yeah, they found that hard to believe. But what it did show was how well the players adapted to it and how well they took it on. So that was probably the biggest shift for me in terms of how we played.
Yeah, and also, I think everyone agrees you've done a fantastic job so far. We know a lot about you. You've obviously managed some big clubs, but can you just tell us a bit about your assistant? Because I know who the guy is, but I don't know too much about him, how important he is, and the team that you brought with you behind the scenes are to you.
Yeah, so yeah, your team's vital. You know what I mean? It's like being on a team as a player. You don't win anything yourself. I do my part that I feel is my strength, but there's other guys that supplement me, round me, that do the bits that I'm probably not as good at. And they're really good at it. So Martin in particular, I'll speak about him obviously because that's who you referred to. Is me and Martin have known each other since we were 10 when we went to high school. We sat in class together. He was my best man at my wedding. I was his best man at the wedding. We sort of parted ways for a little bit. In fact, he went to Ross County to play. I went to England and played at Barnsley for a while. And then when we went back into Scotland, when I moved back home, we played at Hamilton together for 10 years. So when I took over as manager there, I made him captain. When I then left, he took over as manager in his own right and managed Hamilton in the Premier League for 4 years. And then from there, my first opportunity really to take him was at Sunderland. And that was the first time from a managerial sort of assistant sort of relationship. That was the first time that we'd had the opportunity to do that. And obviously we got promoted, which was a great feeling. And then for there, obviously I've took him to Stoke and now to Millwall. So yeah, he certainly gives me balance. You'd probably describe me as the livelier out the two.
That's brilliant. And listen, finally, it's all going great at the minute. That's great. And the end to last season was so strong. How do we kick on? Going into next season?
Yeah, but I think obviously.
And can we kick on?
Yeah, but I believe we can. Of course you can. Yeah, I think what we want to do is try and improve. and try and improve, obviously, like we've touched on, is try to score more goals, try to retain the defensive solidity that we've had in the past, which we're synonymous with, making sure we develop players and we try to make them better. But more importantly, win games. That's why the fans turn up. They don't want to hear about how we're trying to improve the left back or how we try to improve the right winger. You improve that by winning. So for us, we want to be really competitive next year. We've obviously still got a bit of work to do in the window. We've lost quite a few players and we've brought a couple in, but like with every window, at the moment it's difficult. A lot of the Premier League teams, for instance, have only just come back. Crystal Palace, before we played them, had been in 3 days. So they're not at a stage, a lot of these clubs, to make decisions on players that was going to free them up for us to potentially try and either buy them or loan them or whatever. So yeah, I think for us, if we can keep, like you say, the leadership bit, we can improve on our style of play, we can try and recruit well, and we can try and keep that connection with the fans. I think through the 4 facets, I think that sets us up to hopefully have a successful season.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love everything you're saying as well. I love the way you talk. Fair play. Thanks a lot, mate. Really appreciate it. Sorry, Gaffer. Yeah.
If you ever watch the show or whatever, it's a running joke that my football knowledge could be written on the back of a postage stamp. So I thought, rather than me trying to come up with football related questions, which these guys would probably already have asked, I thought that I'd ask some questions more related to you and your personality aside. And I think the most Millwall question that is probably on every Millwall fan's lips right now for the first question would be pie and mash. What's your views on pie and mash? And if you've been to the 2 Armets or Mansies, and this will be really controversial, which one do you prefer?
It's interesting because Matt's laughing at the side of me because we had a debate about pie and mash the other day, and obviously he's telling me about liquor versus gravy and all that sort of stuff. So I haven't actually been yet.
Right.
We do intend on going. We'll set a date aside to make sure we do go. So yeah, but yeah, I want to immerse myself in terms of what it's about. I live in London all the time. I only travel home to go and see my family from time to time when I've got maybe a day off here and there. But beyond that, I live right next to the training ground. I really enjoy being there. My family's down regularly. They're down as soon as we come back for a week because the kids are off school. But yeah, as far as the pie and mash is concerned, I do like pie and I do like mash, so I think that's a good starting point. Whether it's liquor versus gravy, I'm not quite sure at the moment.
Liquor's all right now. I mean, it's not made with eels. It's just parsley sauce, basically. So it's a very watery parsley sauce. And as long as you throw enough chili vinegar in there, then you'll be all right. My second question is another one just really to sort of get to know you to a degree. You're going on a desert island. You can only take 3 things. One of those 3 things is a book, an album, and any item that means something to you. What would be your 3 items?
Oh, wow.
See, I thought I'd throw you because you know all the football questions. I thought this way we can see what you're about rather than us getting your football knowledge.
A book. Oof.
You could say podcast if you wanted to. If we'd be a bit modern, shall we?
Yeah. No, a podcast. I like football podcasts. Listen, football's not just my job; it's my passion. I love it. If as a player, if my level would have been playing at the local amateur park, I would have done that until my legs couldn't do it anymore, basically.
Yeah.
And I was just fortunate enough that I got an opportunity to play at a decent level. And then I've been even more fortunate in the fact that I now coach for a living. So yeah, definitely be football related. As far as albums go, I do like bands. So I like bands, obviously my era was like, say, Oasis and all these sort of guys coming through, and I love all that sort of Stone Roses. Yeah, so that's the type of music that I would listen to. And if I was on a desert island myself and I had one sort of sentimental, it'd have to be a picture of my family, yeah, my kids. They apart from football, that's the only thing in the world that means more to me, is them. So yeah.
No, that's spot on. So yeah, many thanks. And listen, I'm more than happy to pay for you and Max to go to Mansies, mate. And
get some money out of Max, so we'll leave it up to him. If you want,
and
to come along.
And I won't tell anyone if you have gravy. And I won't say anything if you have gravy instead.
I'll have a side pot.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yes, thank you.